Hi, everyone. Welcome to another KE Report webinar. In this webinar, we are featuring Capella Minerals, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol CMIL. And I am joined by Eric Roth, the president and CEO of Capella Minerals. Now, just to bring everybody up to speed, we will be discussing the company's projects in Scandinavia. So one in Sweden, two in Norway. These are gold and copper exploration projects, as well as a couple of the Canadian projects that are in JVs or that are under JVs with a couple partners. We're going to cover all of these projects and also take any questions that any of you who are tuning in have. So please use that question and answer function within this webinar to ask those questions, and I will interject those as we progress through this webinar. Eric, I'm going to let you start to run with it here, but I will be interjecting questions as they come in and some of the ones that have been sent to me earlier on before recording. So please, Eric, kick us off. Thank you for taking some time to join us on another KE Report webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Great to be back, and a big hello to your listeners too. So I guess the purpose here is really to give everybody an update on where we are. We have had the opportunity, Corey, to speak on some of the updates as we have progressed over the last months. But really, this is just to give people an idea of where the projects are today and obviously the way forward. And of course, discovery is our game, and that's what we continue to push towards. If I just look at the portfolio at the big scale, so this is just, we probably have gone over this with your listeners previously, but as you mentioned at the beginning in the introduction, the key thing from our side is that this is it's a mixed portfolio. There's 5 active projects, 3 of which are gold, 2 of which are copper, and the geographical spread is basically between the 2 joint venture projects in Canada, the 1 gold project in Sweden, and the 2 copper projects in Norway. And I think from our perspective, it's a fantastic mix of projects. Because, well, first of all, they're all very good jurisdictions, which is obviously a very important thing for mining projects. But the second thing too is that we do focus on high-grade deposits. The gold projects are all focused on high-grade gold deposits, and the copper projects are all focused on high-grade massive sulfide copper projects. And interestingly, in the case of the 2 copper projects in Norway, so these were former mining districts. These are mines that were in production for hundreds of years, but they were focused on very small areas within these properties. And what we have now is a very large land packages around those former mining districts. And as you know, Corey, one of the favorite expressions in our business is the best place to find a new mine is in the shadow of a head frame. And that's exactly what we have here in Norway. So just if I step through the projects, and I'll go from left to right, no particular order here, but if I start with the Canadian projects, which may be more familiar to most of your listeners. So we have 2 joint ventures. We are not the operators on these joint ventures. So the first one is called Domain. That's in Manitoba. Basically the target here is, this is high-grade gold in iron formations. We have a minority interest in this joint venture. It's operated by a company called Yamana Gold, which of course is one of the mid-tiers in our business. And they have a very strong interest in that district, not just because of Domain, but they also have the Monument Bay project down the road. They are very well, they are very committed to this region in terms of pushing projects forward. Now, this project as it currently stands, it is going through a process now where there's a lot of community consultations going on. The plan is to go into drilling here during the second half of the year, but of course, this is a step-by-step process as we go through. In terms of our projects, the projects where we have done drilling, it's the most advanced in the sense of we have 10,000 meters approximately of drilling done to date on this project, and it's probably the project that could quickest get into resource status with some further drilling. So we're obviously looking forward to seeing some new drilling happening here, hopefully during the second half of this year.
Eric, let me jump in here. Has Yamana given you any color in terms of what might be happening at Domain this year?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so they are going through the community consultations at the moment. There is an exploration agreement in place with the First Nations groups here in this area, and then it's a step-by-step process to get the drill permits and then to come back and to continue One of the things that's really interesting about Domain, one of the things that I particularly like is that the drilling has really only been focused on about 800 meters strike of what we call the main zone, but there's probably about another 5 kilometers or so to still test. So there's actually a lot of potential there to grow, where we see the gold mineralization today, both along strike and also at depth. So there's very good potential to grow this project. I think it's a fantastic project, and we are looking forward to getting some drilling happening here again.
Okay.
Yeah, and the second joint venture we have is Savant Lake. For the people who have followed us for the last, let's say the last 12 months, they would have seen that 12 months ago we completed our earn into Savant Lake. So this is a very large project in Ontario. It's about 290 square kilometers. Now, we were the first company basically to pull this land package together. It's a district scale play, and again, here what we're looking for is high grade gold and iron formation type deposits. So really, we're looking for analogs of Musselwhite, Greenstone, other projects that are in that district. So basically, so we earned in a year ago into the 100% interest. This was a property package that was pulled together by some local prospectors. Now we completed that earn-in, and then back in September we had Ethos Gold do a joint venture with us, and they are currently earning into that project. So they're earning into a 70% interest on the project. I'm not sure, for people who aren't familiar with Ethos Gold, so they are part of the Discovery group of companies. They're quite a well-known group in Canada. They've had very good success, both technical success, and they're very well-known within capital markets. So, and they have a number of sister companies that have done very, very well over the years. One of the stars at the moment from that same stable is Newfound Gold. Probably your listeners are familiar with some of the work they're doing. So this is technically a very strong company, and also, they're very they're very well known in the Canadian markets. So they are currently in the process of earning into a 70% interest in Savant Lake. And the plan at the moment is to get back onto the ground as soon as we can. Now, of course, we're coming into the springtime in the Northern Hemisphere, so now's the time to be getting people back on the ground. And similarly, the plan is to basically go into permitting and be drilling here also in the second half, probably the third quarter if we can. And again, this is a project that it really is a fantastic project in the sense of we've got very high grade gold occurrences on surface, a lot of which have never been drilled. So there's really good potential here for some new discoveries. And of course, Ontario is a great jurisdiction to be in.
So Eric, are there any main payments or big payments coming up from Ethos, or any key work commitments that people need to know about to earn into that 70%?
Yeah, so the earn-in, it's actually quite a good deal for both sides in the sense of, so there are some small cash payments that Ethos makes on an annual basis, but they're fairly modest. The big interest from our side is that we did get, there are 2 million shares, Ethos shares, that were given to us on signing. So that was back in September. And then on every anniversary, there's another 2 million shares for the next 3 years. So it's something that the big interest, I guess the big thing for us is we move the project forward. Ethos Gold only needs to spend $2 million Canadian to earn into that 70%, but also in parallel, we do get these share payments. And of course, that's a huge benefit for Capella shareholders, because that's something that sits in our back pocket, and it's something that, certainly adds value, because obviously those shares, not just success at Savant Lake, but on any of their projects in Canada, that would be a huge benefit to Capella shareholders.
Are there any restrictions on those shares for how the company manages them?
Well, I guess obviously when the day comes to sell, obviously that's not a short-term plan, because I think they have lots of upside to still go. But at the time, obviously that's something we would discuss with them and make sure, if we do have to liquidate, or if we do wish to liquidate, we would do that in an orderly fashion. So, but it is a nice thing to have in our back pocket. As I say, it's a very strong group. It's a nice thing to have a shareholding in them. And also they're pushing forward together a project which I think has some great, it's a great project in its own right as well.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on to the Scandinavian projects, because this was really the transformation of the company here within the last year.
Yeah, that's correct, Corey. So for people who followed us, they would have remembered that in 2020 was really a flexure year for us, in the sense of we divested out of Argentina. We had a portfolio of high-grade gold projects in Santa Cruz province. And of course, the main reason for exiting Argentina was simply that it's just not everybody's cup of tea as a jurisdiction. Okay, and we understand that, but Santa Cruz remains a good destination. But as we exited Argentina, and we did that through 2 deals, and I should just mention quickly too, one of those deals also brought a shareholding in another Canadian company called Cerrado Gold. So that was one of the products from the divestiture. But of course, then that led us to picking up these new projects in Scandinavia. We had been talking to EMX Royalty over the years, and I guess just around the time of the last PDAC, not this one a month ago, or 2 months ago, but 12 months ago. And these projects came up as new projects that they had acquired and they were looking for joint venture partners for. And what I particularly liked about the projects, Corey, is a number of things. I mean, obviously, EMX is a very technically strong group too. They've got the business model they have is fantastic in the sense of, they're actually generating their own royalties for the future. So they go out, acquire these properties, and then offer them to partners, and the partners can move the projects on. Now, the interesting thing about the deal, Corey, is that we have 100% interest in these projects. In the case of both Locken and Shoaley, so as I mentioned at the beginning, these are former mining districts, and frankly, it's quite extraordinary to still, in this day and age, 2021, to actually be able to walk in and just stake an old mining district. I mean, it's almost unheard of. And that was the product of a couple of things. I mean, one, the copper mines in Norway closed down in the mid-80s, and that was primarily a response to the low copper prices. And the second thing that happened in the 80s was also to obviously the discovery, they discovered a lot of oil out in the North Sea. And of course, that took away a lot of the attention from metal mining. And these things have basically been dormant for the last 40 years. So it really is an extraordinary opportunity to be able to pick up old mining districts where, the mines were focused in very distinct parts, but lots of upside potential. And you can see that potential on surface. And the same applies at both Locken and Shoaley. And in the case of Locken, I might just add too that it was the biggest massive sulfide of its class anywhere. So it produced about 24 million tons. It was a Cypress type VMS. I don't want to get into too much into the technical details, but it was a 24 million ton deposit running at a grade of about 2.2, 2.3% copper and about 2% zinc with some gold and silver credits as well. So these are phenomenally high grade deposits. And the attractiveness of these deposits is not just that they're high grade, but they always typically occur in clusters. So that we have one, you've got a very, very, very high probability you'll find more within that prospective horizon. So the attractiveness for us in these districts, both at Locken and Shoaley, is the fact that these were basically old mining districts. And I should also add too that a lot of that old infrastructure is still there, Corey. So that's a big plus for us. If you look at the photograph in the top left corner of that Scandinavia map, this kind of just highlights some of the upside potential. This is actually it's an outcrop from the Shoaley project. You can actually just walk out there and stand on it. And it's an outcrop that runs over 2% copper on surface, and it's never been drilled. I mean, this is something sitting there at surface and nobody's drilled. I mean, where does that happen anywhere on the planet these days? It's really quite really an extraordinary opportunity for us in terms of, getting into an old mining district. And clearly there's lots of targets, lots of potential to still explore. And of course, now with the copper price going gangbusters, it's a great time to be in this space and the copper side of things. So I think they're a fantastic addition to the portfolio, and these are projects that we can move forward very, very quickly, bring them into the drilling stage, and then sort of obviously the next stage is define potential resources on these properties.
So Eric, in summary then, after the mining was shut down at Locken and Shoaley, there hasn't been any other exploration work done until you guys now are taking a more proactive approach?
Yeah, there's been very little done in the last 40 years, Corey. And in fact, a lot of the work, especially at Shoaley, has actually been government funded. So the government actually spent a lot of money, for example, at Shoaley on airborne geophysical surveys, precisely with the idea of attracting exploration companies to these areas. So So not a lot has been done in the last 40 years in terms of systematic work, and therein lies the opportunity for us. The other thing, of course, is too that both of these, I mean, they're fantastic locations in terms of, just great infrastructure. You could imagine Norway anyway as a country has fantastic highways, good, there's cell phones everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. But in the case of Locken, for example, you still have the old railway that runs down to the port. There's still operating shafts functioning shafts in the district. The old flotation cells, the old plant is still there. So these are mining districts where a lot of the mining related infrastructure is still there as well. And of course, the other thing too is, all the people that live in these districts, they all had, grandfathers and family members that used to work in the old mines, so they do understand mining. So I think there's a number of pluses here in terms of, bringing these back to life. And I know the people are very keen. And of course, now with copper demand in general, I think there's a lot of support in Norway to get some of these copper mines back into action again.
Especially the potential for high grade copper too.
Yeah, and that's the attractiveness thing. As people who followed us over the years, Corey, you would realize that the one thing we do focus is just on high grade deposits, right? Because, to me, that's what we should be looking for as a small company. They're things that basically, they're high grade deposits. They're relatively compact, types of deposits we're looking for. So they have a small footprint when you build the mines. And of course, high grade makes money pretty well at any time in the cycle. So we as a small company, that's exactly what we should be looking for. We shouldn't be looking for these mega low grade deposits. What we need to be focusing on are these high grade deposits, which are incredibly attractive and very straightforward to process. They're very straightforward from a metallurgical perspective.
Okay. Perfect. Let's move on to Southern Gold Line too, here in Sweden.
So Southern Gold Line. So this is the Swedish project. So this is in a part of Sweden which is quite underexplored as well too. And for people who aren't too familiar, Sweden really only opened its borders to foreign explorers in the 80s. So it is also relatively early days in terms of exploration there. So in the case of the Southern Gold Line, it's a 500 square kilometer package of ground in a belt where we know there are large deposits. The biggest one, of course, is Barsele, and Barsele is a joint venture between Agnico Eagle and also Barsele Minerals, and that's a multi-million ounce deposit that's in that belt. And immediately next to where we are working, we have two projects, or one was a mine, one is a project in development owned by Dragon Mining, which is Svartliden and Fäboliden. And both of these basically are in our neck of the woods. So we know that this is a belt that's had multiple deposits, it's had multiple discoveries, and we've got some really good potential there to bring some new discoveries in. And I guess over the last couple of months, Corey, we did announce just about 2 months ago that we'd started an auger drill program on the southern parts of the Southern Gold Line project. And the idea of that essentially is because a lot of these properties in northern Sweden and Finland are covered by thin till, what we see gold mineralized boulders on surface, and the plan for us has been to really look for the source of those mineralized boulders. So the work that we've been doing over the last months has been using auger drilling as a tool to help us find the source of where did those gold mineralized boulders come from on surface, because of course we don't see a lot of the outcrop on surface. So we see that as an interesting project. I think if I look at the whole portfolio, Corey, I would expect to be drilling on 4 of the 5 projects this year. Would be the 2 Canadian joint ventures, our 2 Norwegian copper projects. Southern Gold Line, I think, still has a little bit more work to go. I think another good summer here to get those drill targets defined, and then next year basically would be the time when we can get some sort of resource type discovery drilling happening at Southern Gold Line.
Okay, so you're going through an auger program though at Southern Gold Line, right? So yes, how many meters, how many holes are you planning on poking there?
So what we'll do is we're just going back into the system to continue marching through the countryside. So basically we've done a few trial lines. So we're moving now to the north, and we will be expanding that area. The auger drilling is actually it's a very cost-effective way to explore in these till-covered terrains. And so it will help us as we look there. And we're basically starting from the from the bottom to from the south and moving north, because that's the direction basically that the old glacial flows. So we have to go, upstream, as it were. So there will be more auger drilling done here over the coming months. It's a program that will continue, and then the plan is to, on the back of that, that will help us identify targets for diamond drilling, for discovery resource type drilling.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, just at the big picture, so we're looking at effectively be drilling on 4 of the 5 projects this year, Corey. So if I look at Canada, so Domain, which is the joint venture, of course, with Yamana, the Savant Lake, where we have the joint venture with Ethos. In the case of the Domain joint venture, we only need to contribute 30% to expenditures there, so that's not a big ask from our side. And in the case of the Savant Lake joint venture, we are free carried essentially for the first 2 million by Ethos Gold, so we do not need to contribute to that. So both of those projects are being managed by our joint venture partners, and they're moving forward at a pretty good rate of knots, and we look forward to seeing the next round of drilling on those. The projects that we have to look after 100% are the 2 copper projects in Norway, plus also the gold project in Sweden. And there'll be lots here happening over the next months. And as I mentioned, the plan is to get Locken and Shoaley into drilling during the second half of this year. And Southern Gold Line will probably be drilling for next year. So by the time we get to the end of the year, we would expect drilling on 4 of the 5 projects, which I think is going to be an exciting time. We as a company have never had that many projects on the go at the same time. So I think there'll be lots of good news flow going forward.
And the primary focus sounds like it is very much exploration focus, especially Locken and Shoaley, right? Because there hasn't been a whole lot of recent exploration work. It's about getting in there and getting some holes in these projects and seeing what those yield.
That's correct, Corey. And when we talk about exploration at the 2 copper projects, it's really 2 kinds of exploration. One is what we call brownfields exploration, which is really looking for extensions to the old mines. So we know that the miners, when they stop, they just stop because of low metal prices, not because there was no more to do in that area. So part of it is brownfields, which is near mine exploration, so looking for extensions to the known mines. And the second thing is greenfields, which, as I mentioned early on, it's looking along that each of them has sort of 15 kilometers of prospective strike along which we see other types of deposits as well too. So it's really a combination of looking for extensions to the old mines and discovering new deposits, and that's what the focus will be on those 2 copper projects. And the focus, of course, staying on this high-grade copper story. That's basically what the target is.
So Eric, I know this is hard to answer, but I get always a lot of questions asking, which project is your favorite? Which one do you see the biggest upside in? Again, hard to answer so early on, but where are you excited about?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, Corey. To be honest, I love them all, but I think just from a corporate perspective, I particularly like these high-grade copper deposits in Norway. I just think these massive sulfide type systems are just fantastic targets for a company like us. They don't need to be big. 10 million tons plus could be is big enough to start a mine, and so they're things that, because they're relatively concentrated, you don't need a lot of tons of those grades to make a new mine basically in these areas. So I think that's something I particularly like. Well, I like high grade deposits in general, but I particularly like these massive sulfide type deposits. And and people who followed us previously with Mariana Resources, we had another high grade discovery in Turkey called Hodmarden. Again, that wasn't a big deposit, but very high grade, and it is now going through feasibility studies, and it will be a mine. So that's the business model we like, is getting in there, making the discovery on high grade deposits, and then pushing them through the mine development studies. But personally, I really like the high grade copper deposits. I think they're a fantastic target for us to be looking at. Of course, the gold I like as well too. I mean, we've spent many years in the gold space as well too. But to me, they'd sort of be the cherry on the cake.
Okay. Yeah. And well, you aren't the operators of those JVs in Canada, right? So we'll
That's
follow
correct.
along and see what Yamana or Ethos does with those projects. But in terms of the Scandinavian projects, especially the copper Norwegian projects, if you do hope to be drilling this year, how big of a drill program would you like to have? Or is this just too early to tell as well?
Yeah, well, one thing I can say is we do have lots of targets to test, and people who are following us, they might have seen that in Shoaley, for example, we just announced about a week ago some results from this artificial intelligence, this data mining exercise. And to cut a long story short, we came up with 26 high-grade copper zinc targets, of which actually some were within our existing properties and some were outside. So we actually had to stake more ground to cover the ones that were outside our property. So we actually have a lot to do. There's a lot of targets out there. I mean, in a perfect world, we'd like to drill them all, but obviously this is a step-by-step process. And first of all, we need to show the concept, get some drill hits early on, show that this is the massive sulfide, this is the high-grade copper potential that we see here, and then build from there. So it's hard to give numbers right now, but what I can say is there's lots of targets out there. So it's just a question of being systematic, drilling our best targets first, and then moving through them in a systematic fashion.
How about funding for the company? What kind of cash is the company sitting on? I know that you will probably need to raise money as you progress through any sort of drill programs, but give us an update here.
Yeah, so the current treasury isn't huge. I mean, we have about 1.2 million Canadian at the moment, which is enough for some initial drilling on the projects. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is that we do have, as I mentioned, these marketable securities in Ethos Gold and also Cerrado Gold. So that could add another 1.6 million to treasury. So if we take the option of liquidating those share positions, so that would bring another 1.6 million into treasury. And then, of course, the third part of the equation is that we also have some warrants that are very close to being in the money. There's some 12-cent warrants from our last financing in September last year. And we are currently trading just a whisker under 11 cents or so. So we're very close to some of those warrants coming into the money. If all those warrants came into the money and were exercised, that would bring about $7 million into the company. So the step process for us here is effectively, obviously, use the cash we have wisely, get some drilling happening on the key targets. But then as we go, we have the option of converting some of those shares, or I should say selling those marketable securities to continue funding drilling. And then also there's a hope that some of those warrants come into the money in the short term as well. And then, of course, a regular financing is always a possibility there. But at these levels, we prefer to have those other options come through first.
Well, and Eric, big picture too, just remind everybody of how many shares are outstanding in this company, because you do have these 5 projects here, 2 under JV, 3 in Scandinavia that are exploration focused here. And the market cap of the company is relatively small. So how many shares are outstanding?
Yeah, so Corey, so we have 151 million shares outstanding at the moment, and at a 10 cents plus or minus, that means we're trading at 15 million Canadian, which is actually, to my mind, it's a really cheap entry point for a portfolio of this quality, and and as I say, to be able to have 100% control of old mining districts is just awesome. So the market cap, as I say, about 15 million Canadian. So it's a very modest valuation for what I think is a tremendous portfolio of assets. And of course, and our biggest shareholder, one of the things I will mention too is, we've had some very good support from our biggest shareholders. Sandstorm traditionally has been one of the biggest shareholders, but we had a new group out of Austria, a group called Frucht Express. They've been buying on market since November, and they have now accumulated probably a 15%, 16% position in the company, just on the strength of the Norwegian copper projects. I mean, of course, obviously, they like the gold story as well. But just to demonstrate that we have had some large shareholders coming in just on the strength of these Norwegian copper projects.
Now, would you guys think about JVing these Norwegian or even the Swedish Southern Gold Line project, kind of like you've done in Canada with the other projects?
Yeah, look, it's always a possibility, Corey, and I guess we'll look at those options as we go down the track. I think our first preference would be to advance them a little bit more, to be able to add value to the project in the short term. But of course, midterm, of course, we would always be open to that possibility. So, but I would say that short term, our goal is to add value to the projects, because right now, obviously, while you still have 100% interest in those projects, is when the shareholders get the maximum benefit. So it's obviously looking for that. I guess looking for the balance there between pushing the projects forward. But of course, if for the right joint venture, we would certainly consider that. let's try and extract as much value as we can from shareholders in the interim. So
absolutely. So what kind of news flow should investors be looking at here, especially for these Norwegian copper plays as you move towards drilling?
Yeah, so Corey, so I guess so as you know, and obviously both Canada and Scandinavia are now coming into the peak field season, so there's going to be lots of news flow from all of the projects. Now, and most of the work that we're doing, except for Southern Gold Line, is really just tightening up drill targets and getting ready to drill during the second half of the year. So the plan for the two Canadian projects and also the two Norwegian copper projects is to just tighten up those drill targets, make sure we're drilling the best things, and then get out there and drill. And again, we don't need to overscience some of these things. For example, that the outcrop in the photograph there that's running 2% copper, there's not much more to do with that. Just get out there and drill it, right? So I mean, we don't need to overscience these things either, right? So we will see a lot of news flow over the coming months in terms of just tightening up those drill targets and then moving on towards drilling. And as I mentioned in the case of the Swedish gold project, it's such a large project with a number of targets on it. This summer, I think, will be just again fine-tuning, getting drill targets ready, probably for either next winter or next summer, sort of thing. So, but as I say, the plan is to get to drilling 4 of the 5 projects before the end of this year. So.
Okay. One other question that's come in deals with some of the COVID restrictions or the difficulty in traveling to some of the projects. What sort of a team do you have, or how active can you be managing these projects in Norway and Sweden currently?
Yeah, and that's actually a very good question, Corey. So Norway's been the most problematic right now, just simply because it has its borders completely closed to all non-nationals. So Norway right now is a little bit difficult to manage for us being outside of the country. Sweden's been a little bit more flexible and always has been a bit more flexible. But thankfully, we are able to draw on EMX Royalty Company, who we acquired these projects from. They have quite a good team of people on the ground, both in Sweden and some people in Norway too. So obviously in the short term, we're relying very heavily on both EMX's team and all the local talent we can get hold of to take the projects forward. And of course, once those the border restrictions start easing, then we'll be able to get in also and help as well too. So, but for the moment, we're relying very heavily on EMX's field teams, and it's been a very good relationship, and they're very keen to help deploy some of their people into our projects. So the bottom line is we do continue to work the projects even with the restrictions with local people, obviously.
Okay, so it's not slowing you down right now, but as borders open up, it'll make it easier.
Well, let's just say things will go a lot faster once the borders open up. But obviously, obviously the tricky one at the moment is just Norway, because it is closed to non-nationals, for international travel. Thankfully, we do have some people on the ground, Norwegians, who can help us take the projects forward. So,
okay. Anything else that you want to get to here, Eric? That fields most of those questions.
Yeah, no, I think, Corey, from our side, it is an exciting portfolio, good mix of gold and copper. And for people who followed us over the years, they'd realize that we have been a successful team over the years. We know what needs to be done. So let's just get out there, make the discoveries. And for us, really, the sweet spot is pushing these projects from discovery through the mining studies. So the plan for us, that's the business model. And, it's worked very well for us in the past, both with Mariana Resources and people who remember us from Extori gold mines. So basically the plan here is to continue, make the discoveries, and get resources on the books as quickly as we can. So,
and I think one thing to elaborate on there with the management's track record, with Extori and with Mariana, you guys have worked up projects in jurisdictions that maybe aren't top priority for other companies, or even on investors' minds, right? In Scandinavia, that's probably one of the better jurisdictions that you guys have worked in. Can you elaborate on this a little bit, Eric?
Yeah, and that's correct, Corey. Obviously, with Mariana, we were very heavily focused on Turkey, which, personally, I think is a great jurisdiction in the sense of, great geology. Yeah, there are some things that are not easy to manage, but at the end of the day, it does still support mining. But certainly, there's no doubt that Turkey, in the case of the Hot Martin discovery, and even Argentina. In the case of we were in Santa Cruz province, we had the Cerro Moro discovery with Extoria gold mines. I mean, Argentina can be a bit of a headache too, right? So this is much easier to manage than either of those two jurisdictions. That's one thing I can say. So
okay. Well, if anybody has any follow-up questions for Eric regarding anything going on at Capella Minerals here, any of these 5 projects, feel free to email me, fleck@kereport.com. I will get Eric to address those, and I will keep following up with Eric as more news hits the market. We will continue to record updates for our show, kereport.com. Eric, unless there's anything else that you want to add here, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for updating everybody. And this video recording will be available shortly after, so everyone can tune in case you missed any of the nuance points that we discussed.
No, thanks, Corey, and thanks for your time too. And great to be back. And we look forward to keeping people updated with the news flow as we go forward. There's lots of exciting things in the near future coming up. So it'll be a very busy year for us on all the projects.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect, Eric. We will leave this meeting now, and the recording will go up shortly. So thanks for your time, Eric.
Okay, thanks, Corey.